up weeping. He's grieving. He's pouring out his soul, shedding tears, and weeping over the loss even of an enemy. He's grieved over the loss of an enemy. In fact, he says something so telling there in verse 33. He says, "Oh, my son, if only I had died instead of you." And do you realize what he's really saying there? In effect, David is saying, I wish that my kingdom could have been saved at my expense. I wish the kingdom could have been saved through the death of the king. I wish the enemies could have been spared and the king be put to death. That was David's wish. He says, I would gladly trade places. I would rather die and have my enemy live. It's astounding. And of course, David doesn't get his wish. He doesn't, that's not how the story plays out. But in the fullness of time, that's exactly what happens. Right? I mean, Jesus comes along, and that's exactly what Jesus does. How does Jesus save his kingdom? Not through the death of his enemies, but through the death of himself. You see that? Jesus is the king who dies to save his enemies. He's the king who saves his kingdom through his own death. And on the cross, Jesus is the one who is treated as that rebellious son. He's the one who is hung up on that tree accursed. He's the one suspended between heaven and earth as one that the earth rejects and heaven won't accept. He bears that curse for rebellious children. And he does that to save his enemies, to save you and me. See, if you and I are ever going to learn to love our enemies, how do we do that? Well, we start by remembering that, truth be told, you and I are all the Absaloms. When God looks at us, right, isn't that what Romans says? While we were yet sinners, while we were yet God's enemies, God looks at us. We're the rebellious children. We're the ones who commit treason in the kingdom. We're the ones who want to overthrow the kingdom and do things our own way. And yet God looks down at us and loves us and trades places with us. He's willing to die for us. When we remember that, and to the degree that we take that to heart and believe that and see that, and you remember that God loved you when you were an enemy, then you begin to love that other person who's really hard to love. Not that it's easy, not that there are simple, neat answers, but all of a sudden your motivation changes. You see, God loved you when you were an enemy. You see, God is patient with you when you don't deserve it. You see the compassion God shows to you